Brett, welcome to the podcast. It's an absolute honor to have you here, man. Huge shout out to our guy, Sean, for getting us connected. For people who aren't familiar with you and all the incredible work you've done in the space around fitness, performance, kettlebells, and everything else that way, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and, just how much of a legend you are in the space that way, man?
Well, yes, I'll fill in the short story long. But Dan, it's great to have the opportunity to be on the podcast, speak to you and your audience. What can I say about me that I haven't said already? So I'm undergraduate sports medicine athletic training degree, master's in rehabilitative sciences, which is actually drug and alcohol rehab, and went and took my first job in a little town in Virginia, and happened to be Gray Cook's hometown. So Gray walks into my training room and asks me if I need any help. And I'm like, if you can tape an ankle, you are my new best friend. And so I had the opportunity to work with him and progressed into running a hospital fitness center where I got interested in Pavel Satsulin's work and got certified at the second ever kettlebell certification in February of 2002. Started teaching with Pavel in April of 2003, and that led to me reconnecting with Gray and doing teaching and working with FMS and the Secrets of series DVDs, continuing to work with Pavel, over 22 years, a position which I recently stepped down from. And so, I always forget to mention this, but yeah, CSCS for like 25, 26, I forget how many years now. So about 30 years, all told. And, yeah, kind of, I'm at a juncture with a change in jobs where I'm kind of, reminiscing, looking back over the career. So it's fun to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like you mentioned, the impact that you've had on the space through kettlebells, FMS, your own work beyond that way is absolutely incredible. It's funny, just on Friday, I did a podcast with a few individuals, and Mike Lair was part of that. And Mike Lair always brings up FMS, always brings up ankle mobility, glute stability, and the Turkish get up. Those are like some of the guarantees in life. And every time I hear him do that, I'm like, that just sounds like a Brett Jones legacy impact right there that way. And you mentioned, you've been doing the kettlebell training and you were one of the first cohorts that way to get certified through StrongFirst from Pavel in the country that way. Like, you've been doing this for a long time, and it's something that I think people have acknowledged the kettlebell is a tool, and it's in almost every weight room I see now, which is great. However, I feel like a lot of times people don't fully understand that tool and what it's capable of, and they use it for 2 or 3 exercises, right? I guarantee you everyone's going to be doing kettlebell swings, but it's like there's so much more to it than that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe one of the unique things about the StrongFirst certification is, like, you didn't just like sit down and learn the didactic side. Like, you had a practical component as well, where you had to do, I believe it was 100 snatches in 5 minutes or something like that. Is that correct?
It is. So we definitely, we leaned heavily into the practical and component of making sure that the person who was going to take on this tool not only could demonstrate it to standard technique for us, but they also knew how to coach it. So it's very much an instructor and a certification. And yeah, I think people, because it is such a brutish kind of utilitarian tool. I mean, it's a cannonball with a handle on it. And so the perspective is, well, what could be unique about that, right? It's just this brutish thing, and that thick handle, offset center of mass, just brings with it a bunch of benefits that traditional implements don't have. And when you're swinging, cleaning, snatching, and the center of mass of that bell is 6 to 8 inches beyond your hand, and you're having to control how that bell is moving into the rack position, the overhead position, or simply to the top of the swing. There's a lot happening there that doesn't happen with other implements. And then as you get into the loaded overspeed eccentric, when you hike and absorb and redirect the force from that swing, clean, or snatch, you're doing one of the most athletic things that you can do. And I've been on a podcast. I've been on a podcast. I've been on a force plate and doing two-handed swing with just a 24 kilo bell, but producing upwards of 3.5 times my body weight eccentric load at the bottom of that swing. That's a really nice return on investment of a 53-pound weight giving me 3.5 times my body weight eccentric load in that bottom position. And that's unique to the kettlebell. You won't swing a barbell between your legs more than once. And then you'll decide, probably not going to do that again. And dumbbells just don't work out the same because of the way the implement has to be adjusted to the movement rather than the movement being enhanced by the implement. And so, and then you take it into the grinds and the presses. When you've got that offset center of mass on the back of your hand, it's going to guide you into better overhead positions. It enhances what you get out of the getup, the military press. Even for squats, where you can sit in this really comfortable rack position and really compress the breathing musculature, get the lats involved. There's a whole host of things that are happening with a kettlebell that just don't happen with other implements.
You brought up so many incredible points there, Brett. And one that I really want to dive into more is that rack position a little bit, because as you mentioned, that's common amongst squat variations. That's common amongst Olympic variations. And that's something that I've been so surprised by how few people, even trained lifters, really own that position. Like you would think, hey, they're throwing a barbell around 2-3 times a week, Olympic lifts, like that rack position has to be solid and stable. And yet for a lot of them, I'm not sure if it's the thoracic mobility piece or more the motor control side of it that way, where they don't actually feel their lats engaged. They feel very comfortable and kind of relaxed in that rack position. And, at least for me, every time I do it, if I'm doing it what I feel correct, it's a little uncomfortable because it's like there's a lot of muscles activating. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to hang out here. It's like this is an active position. And I believe Pavel actually mentioned that in relation to the plank in one of his books as well, not to get too off topic, but people get in the plank position and they hang out and they're like, oh yeah, this is easy. You're not doing a plank if you're able to hold it 5 minutes. It's like it needs to be active. And I think one of the many applications I see for the kettlebells that I love is really helping people who are struggling with that rack position, whether that's from a performance side and they want to, compete in Olympic lifting, or maybe more of a rehab side of, hey, they're having pain for some reason when they're in that position. They're just not active or as active as I want them to be. And I found a ton of benefit from using the kettlebell as a bit of a teaching tool, because we also get a little bit of left versus right side feedback there as well. Hey, one of these things doesn't feel like the other, and we can then kind of course correct and adjust from there.
Absolutely. And, the rack position, we like to say that, your press is only going to be as good as your clean. And I would also say your squat is only going to be as good as your clean. So getting the bell into the rack position for kettlebell specific lifts, and this is an area that some Olympic lifters will struggle with as they transition into the kettlebell, because what they're used to doing is shooting those elbows forward and creating that barbell rack position and getting it back on the SC joints. Not something I've ever been good at or comfortable with. And so that ends the discussion for me on the barbell rack position. But it does become, to your point, an area where you get really comfortable popping it up there. It's sitting in the right place. How active you need to be is changes. And people can lose some emphasis there. With the kettlebell rack position, we're really tight to the body. So the ability to engage the lat, compress the breathing musculature, all of that's there. And there's no flip involved. I don't have to flip and dive my elbows forward. I actually want to get sneaky and sneak my elbow underneath the bell so that I create this really solid rack position, tight to the body, but not necessarily across the body. That'll be another common thing that you see. And because that offset center of mass, if you're too vertical, that it's going to try to pull you off to the side. So it really enhances this compressed rib cage. And that brings with it, and if we're talking about front squats and things of that nature, that sort of compression and having to breathe under load really brings a lot of benefit to it. So yeah, it's deceptively simple. It's actually something that I've spent the last couple of years, really, because of the iron cardio practice that I do, and I just do what ends up being a lot of single reps And your ability to zip that bell into that rack position, have that perfect start to the press. It goes wrong more often than wrong with quotation marks, right? It's, there's variation in how you come into that rack position, even for somebody that's been doing it for 20 years. And, human movement variability is human movement variability. It's always there. But yeah, the clean is definitely a great emphasis. And I remember Pavel talking about a study, I don't know how, out of Russia, I don't know how many years ago, but sets of 10 double cleans with the pair of 32s left experienced and well-trained athletes' heart rates elevated for quite some time. And I've repeated that and had the same experience.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised at all by that. I mean, it's really a full body movement. And as you mentioned, it's one that's complex in nature. There's a lot involved within the pattern. There's a lot going on. And I think it's one that, on one hand, I think Olympic lifting has become so popular in athletics, and for good reason. Like you just mentioned, the benefits are very clear. But on the other hand, I think the kettlebell is a great implement for those of us like you and like myself who just aren't fully comfortable with the barbell variations yet for some reason. I think the kettlebell is like a perfect in between that gives you the benefits without the need to learn the barbell implement. But as you mentioned, there's still a bit of a motor learning effect that needs to occur to use the kettlebell and run through these movement patterns efficiently that way. What's kind of been your most effective teaching pattern? I'm sure that's a loaded question. Teaching pattern or strategy, if you will, for helping new athletes to kind of master that kettlebell clean in a somewhat time efficient manner.
Right off with the cheat clean. And if the word cheat bothers anybody, you can call it a successfully compensated clean. Whatever works for you. But so if I want my right hand to have the bell, I will set up into my hip hinge position. My right hand will grab the handle. My left hand will come over top, kind of like a pistol grip, and wrap that hand, not interlace, but just lay over top. And then I hike it and I bring it into position with both hands. I find out what my rack position is. That hand comes on to cover. I drop the bell down and I have a ton of assistance from that non-working hand to cheat clean the bell. I do not skip that step. This is the key to learning the bell. We really want the kettlebell clean to be a very vertical sort of movement. We're rolling it right up into the rack. We're not swinging it away from us and then bringing it into the rack. And with the cheat clean, that's kind of hard to do because once you've got both hands on the bell and you hike, it's pretty natural just to pick it right up into that rack position. And then getting the help on the drop and starting to understand the drop, how the elbow drops and the bell rolls off, will also accelerate the progress in learning the drop later on. I always like to say that the 3 horsemen of frustration are too much, too soon, too often. And when people start trying to learn something, they're like, well, I need to do a bunch of this. Well, that's too much. You're probably taking it on too soon, and then you're going to do it too often. And you can, get bruises, and you can kind of cause some problems. Cheat clean pretty much takes all of that stress away. And
Right.
so, and here's the fun thing. If you really want to be lazy, and that's something I specialize in. If you really want to be lazy, don't teach them anything else. Just let them go with the cheat clean for weeks, months. Guess what they're going to start to do without you having to get involved? They'll just start to clean the bell, right? It's like sometimes the best way to teach something is don't teach it. But just that cheat clean really gets them off to the right start. Then there are ways that you can progress it as far as starting to peel the assistance away on the way up. So instead of going back to that right hand clean example again, left hand coming on, take that left hand off a little sooner on the way up until you're not using it on the way up. Then do the same process on the drop. And then, the clean is basically right there. I used to joke that, teaching the clean was a simple 5-step process. Cheat clean, cheat clean, cheat clean, cheat clean, double clean. But then, other things got involved. And so yeah, so but the cheat clean solves many, many problems, and just go with it for a while.
Yeah, no, that I like that a lot. It makes a lot of sense. It's like imperfect movement will lead to perfect movement with time.
Yep.
The biggest thing is just get moving through the pattern, because if you don't move through the pattern, you're not going to get better at it, right? It's a little comical to me how many times I open up social media and people are showing you, the best exercises to get better at this or that, and none of them actually involve the exercise. And it's like, at the end of the day, simplicity wins, especially with the kettlebell. Like you mentioned, it's a unique implement. You can't get the same effect from a barbell or a dumbbell. So if you want to get better at the kettlebell clean, you've got to find a way to clean the kettlebell. It's simple as that. I like that a lot. Do you see the snatch as a progression from the clean, or do you flip it and actually occasionally go snatch before clean?
Always clean before snatch, and you could build the snatch off of the clean. So, and there is a bridge exercise between the cheat clean and the full clean called the row to clean. So you do literally kind of a one arm row, and then as you complete one of your rows, you're just going to stand up into the clean. And it really, it's usually that last piece of the puzzle for people that haven't worked it out on their own by just practicing the cheat clean. But the way we're being vertical with the clean, we're also bringing that kind of vertical nature to the snatch. We went on a 20+ year journey with the kettlebell snatch, where in the original RKC book, Russian Kettlebell Challenge book, which was published in late 99 or 2000, something like that. It, in the section that describes the snatch, he says, the snatch is a clean that ends up overhead. Well, a few years later, people started saying the snatch is a swing that ends up overhead. And the intent of that was to emphasize the hip action that's in your swing and in your clean is the same thing, the hip action that's in your snatch. It's a more powerful, so if we scale those things, a clean on a scale of 1 to 10 is like depending on the load, but typical loads, it's a 2 or a 3. If 10 is max effort and 1 is kind of tried, it's a 2 or a 3. Now, that doesn't mean it's not crisp and athletic and well performed. It just doesn't take a lot of energy to do it. You're not moving the bell that far. Swings can get into that 8 to 10 zone. Most efficient, arguably around 7 to 8. Snatch is also in that 6 to 7 range. And so there's a lot more power involved in the snatch because we are moving it much further. We're tightening the arc and putting it overhead. And so what that started to lead to is people swinging the bell away from themselves and literally trying to swing the bell to the top. And then we thought we were being smart by coming back around to this idea of the snatch being a clean that ends up overhead. And at one of the leadership meetings, we're in Italy, and Sasha, one of our Croatian and members of the Teachers of Strength, says, "Oh, yeah, that's in the original book." And I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I have to go 20 years around to come back to this?
It's funny how that works sometimes, and I like how you kind of broke it down versus the clean versus the swing that way, and it is interesting to think about the snatch as a clean that ends up overhead, because I hear that from different people that throw the barbell around, is they're like, "Well, yeah, like, if I wanna clean, I just stop at the rack. If I wanna snatch, I either press it overhead," which I guess that becomes more of a clean and jerk, or it just naturally ends up overhead and then I stand up. One of the 2 that way. Going back to some of those things we mentioned earlier, though, like whether that's ankle mobility or thoracic spine mobility and kind of that FMS integration. I mean, those are all areas that I feel like people struggle with extensively. And they're areas that a lot of people are trying different things to correct, right? Like, oh, I'm doing cat cows, I'm doing my ankle rocks and my calf stretching, and it's not improving. And one of the many applications that I've seen a lot of benefit from with the kettlebell from a rehab standpoint to address those things is actually applying load to it. Because I think a lot of the times people do these mobility drills or whatever, and there's no load component. And it's like, if we remove the load, your mobility might even be okay. It might be where it needs to be. So to me, that's not just a simple, like, it needs to move more WD-40 kind of thing. It's like, hey, maybe the reason you're not getting the mobility you want is your body's trying to tell you something. Hey, we don't know how to organize ourselves here. We don't have perceived stability, so we're not going to let you move there. And for me, the kettlebell being the odd implement that it is like a great way to bridge that gap where we can still get them into those positions, but now they have to learn how to stabilize like crazy. And even just holding the kettlebell in like a goblet type position, which, as you mentioned, should be active. A lot of times people just hold it here and it's like there's no compression going on. Holding the kettlebell, deep squat, a little bit of rock side to side, like that's probably done more for me to fix different people's ankle mobility than sitting around and stretching calves all day or sitting there on the table and scraping away at them. And, not to say there's not value in those things, but I think a lot of the times if we add a load component and a skill component to some of these movement patterns, the mobility naturally follows instead of only checking one box, trying to just get more WD-40 out of it. It's like, hey, let's actually do something that covers 5 different things at once instead of just one thing at a time.
Definitely. And, I'll as an FMS guy and an AT that has an SFMA background, this is why I screen people. By the time I'm teaching you how to squat, I know you have the ankle mobility that you need to do it. That's something I took off the table in the process of running the screen. If you have a motor control issue and I know you need more stability. I already know that based on either an SFMA breakout or running the FMS on somebody that's not in pain. And so by the time I get to making decisions in this, then we get into kind of the SFMA reset, reinforce, reload. Like we've been trying to get people to load for a long time, and the industry really has turned around to where getting to load is now a general focus for most routines. And it is, if you open up some ankle mobility, cool. I'm a big fan of doing, half kneeling dorsiflexion with the Dow and some of the half kneeling pulses and things that we do. And even the half kneeling pulses get into handling some load in those positions. But then I want to use it. I want to use it in a way that's going to be meaningful and integrated into how the body's going to use it anyway. So let's get into a deep goblet squat, rock around, and use that ankle mobility. Let's get into a good step up or a lunge or even a rear foot elevated split squat where I let you use all that new ankle mobility you just gained. I'm not trying to restrict you back to that vertical tibia. I'm going to put you in those positions and make you use and load that thing we just changed. Because if I open up mobility and then I don't come back and give you the ability to control it, I've done you a disservice. I have not helped you much at all.
It's interesting because as you're talking, I just think back to some of my conversations with Gray earlier this year. And all of those conversations for me reinforced the use of the FMS and the SFMA breakouts and so on that way with the athletic population. And going back to every time I open social media again, someone new is trying to take a shot at it. And someone new is trying to say, oh, well, there's not value in it. And every time it's like, okay, what have you found that's better? And all of a sudden, it gets really quiet. For me, this is still a very tried and true methodology. It's a very tried and true framework because I think with all of these things, whether it's kettlebells, whether it's movement assessment, there needs to be some kind of inner workings that puts the pieces to the puzzle together. You can't just throw something together and call it, a Mod Podge program. It's like it has to fit, it has to work. There has to be a stepwise approach to it, in my opinion. I think the FMS does a great job of doing that from a movement assessment. The SFMA does a great job of doing that with the breakouts as well. And I think, we really need to, instead of looking to kind of like take shots at stuff, recognize the value within them and recognize what we can learn in a very short, efficient kind of time pattern about the person we're trying to serve and how that is going to direct what we do with implements like the kettlebell. Because obviously if someone doesn't meet the prerequisites, maybe I have to modify a little bit. And it's okay, we can still train, but we're going to train with modification. when we're going to address some of these underlying issues that way. I'm very pro FMS and SFMA for that reason. And I think, I just think for some reason people are trying to get away from it, but I still see so much value in it and the simplicity of it as well. Like, God forbid the Wi-Fi goes out in your facility. What are you going to do? Hey, there's storms in North Carolina all week right now. Power goes out, your force plates don't work. What are you going to do? Are you going to just not assess your athletes because you don't have access to the tech? Or are you going to do something that's worked for decades and can be done with or without power, with or without the internet? Like it doesn't get much more simple than that.
Definitely. And I know FMS just released, I don't want to call it a podcast, but a video and discussion on a very research-based retrospective of the last 25 years of research on the FMS, and is it predictive, and different things like that, and that's something that's been interesting in the research over the years, and you see a lot of different levels of quality of research coming out on it, and in the end, I've never used the FMS because of research. I used the FMS because I could, within 10 to 15 minutes, I knew where to get started with somebody. And I had probably revealed, in taking a detailed history, there's things people forget. I'm actually finding things in the screen like, yeah, hey, this is a problem for you. You sure you didn't have any injuries? Or, oh yeah, that time in high school I had this happen, and whatnot. I don't, by the time I'm teaching you a squat, I'm not wondering if it's a movement issue. That's done. I know it's a technique issue. I know that I can, move forward with this person. And so that ability for me to just kind of quickly say, I've already got a baseline here, and I know how this person's moving, where I need to put the bullseye. Boy, that's done me nothing but favors. And
Yeah.
in the years that I've been doing it.
Absolutely. And building off that concept of having frameworks for things or some kind of like roadmap, if you will, one of the things that I continue to hear about as part of your legacy is the iron cardio protocol. And you brought it up earlier, but I've literally had some patients back when I was in Maryland that are a little kettlebell obsessed, for lack of a better way to put it, so much so that they'll bring their own kettlebells into the clinic, which we have bells, but they're in pounds, they're not in kilos, and they only went up to 50 pounds, which for some people is just not enough load for them. But one of the things many of them cite is the iron cardio protocol. And that was one of the things the one guy mentioned is he's like, I'm having issues with it. My knee doesn't feel correct when I'm running through it. And he's like, I know it's simple. I know that I have to do a clean. I know I have to do a press. I know I have to do a squat, but something's not feeling right and we need to troubleshoot it. I'd love to hear more about kind of the origins of the iron cardio protocol, because that's something that I still hear discussed to this very day.
So I, in 2020, I was diagnosed with primary tonsillar squamous cell carcinoma, stage 3. So I'm now a 54-year-old cancer survivor. And once I was done with treatment and I'd lost over 40 pounds, I started into training again. And when I started into training again, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back to body weight exercise. So, because, and I was looking forward to pull-ups because I'm like, I'm 40 pounds lighter. Pull-ups are going to be great. They were not. They were very challenging. I was too weak to move my own body weight well. And then I said, well, swings and get-ups. I'm just going back to the program minimum. I wasn't strong enough to be powerful yet. Really needed to reset my strength base. And so in 2014, Pavel and Alexei Senard had written an article called Strength Aerobics, a Powerful Alternative to HIIT. And I had used a version of that in my training really since then. And I'd built out one or two variations off of the original article. And then after, I started doing this after cancer treatment, I started building out it was Russian nesting dolls. I'd come up with one new variation. There's 9 more within that. And then, in the end, I've got just dozens and dozens of variations where I'll finish a session sometimes and have to go back 6 months to a year in my training log to find when I did that exact variation of it. And the iron cardio name came from a student of mine who we were we were going through the protocol or going through the program, and he sends me his notes, and he's like, iron cardio, 20 minutes, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wait a second. Did you mean strength aerobics? He's like, yeah, my boxing coach used to call it an iron cardio day. And I'm like, can I have that? And he's like, of course. And so the name changed, and it kind of fits with all the different variations and variants that come off of this thing. But real simple program, some variation or combination of clean press, squat, and or snatch, maybe a pull up, and it really it continues to succeed. I've been following the same program now for over 5 years. And so I don't know if anybody out there has followed a single program for 5 years, but I've been doing it and still getting good results. Some of my, and I just filmed an Iron Cardio Volume 2 video that'll be out here in the next couple of months. And looking forward to getting that out there, because it really, again, it just takes the number of variants and ways that you can do this and blows it out into some really athletic movement.
So it sounds like volume 2 is a progression off volume 1, where the same foundation is still there, but it sounds like you have some more kind of breakout variations included in that.
Yeah. I'm trying, I don't know when this podcast will go live, so I'm trying not to ruin the big reveal with on the video.
I know there's secrets here,
But I will say it's very athletic, and it gets you out of your set symmetrical stance.
that's awesome. Yeah. No, it's incredible. And to your point about doing a program for 5 years, I think a lot of times we overcomplicate our training in the space. And we think, oh, well, I need to do this, I need to do that. Well, I can't work this efficiently because I don't have that machine. And it's like, at what point are you going to just be honest with yourself and just start training really hard? Like, it's as simple as that for me. It's like, we love to make excuses. We love to overcomplicate things and blow it way out of proportion. But at the end of the day, there's so much value in simplicity. And if you can do those base movement patterns with the kettlebell, and then you mentioned the pull-up as well, which I'm a huge fan of pull-ups. I love the weighted pull-up. I love to be able to pull my own weight every time I go to like state fair, county fair, something like that. I got to find the Marines with the pull-up bar, and I got to at least tie whatever the record is for the day, which there's only been one instance where I couldn't beat their record. I just PR'd on a weighted pull-up the day before, and the record at the event was 40 consecutive, which is impressive.
Wow.
We got to the level of the daily record, but we didn't quite get to that level. But there's something about that ability to pull your own body weight to higher ground easily, repeatedly, and then being able to be strong enough to add additional weight to it. There was an individual I was working with down in San Antonio earlier this year who was a former Top Gun weapons school instructor, and he told me one of their rules was they had a pull-up bar in the door to their office. And every time you walk in or out the door, you stop and you hit the pull-up bar and you bust out a few reps. And it doesn't matter if it was 10 reps, 20 reps, just do more pull-ups was essentially the takeaway. And it kind of, built off that concept of greasing the groove or having this sort of like movement snack throughout your day, if you will. And for me, the pull-up was like the best example of upper body pulling strength, because you hit pretty much everything in the upper body in one movement, but obviously we can't forget about the lower body. And I think that's where the kettlebell comes in really well, whether it's swings, squats, cleans, whatever. Just like breaking up your day with small kettlebell movements can have so much power and impact on all aspects of your health and your performance that way. I believe it was Rob Wilson did a little write-up there. He's one of the Altus instructors and has a great book called The Check Engine Light, about how he keeps a kettlebell in his kitchen because it's just that essential for him. It's like, you have to have it there, and you have to be able to use it in your training regularly and use it to kind of break up the effects of your day. And I think, at a time, again, when everyone's trying to overcomplicate things and say, oh, well, you need to do this 2-hour workout, or you need to find 90 minutes to get into the gym. It's like, hey, look, if you keep a kettlebell nearby and you just do a few basic patterns a few times throughout the day, odds are you're going to start checking the boxes and seeing progress in your health and performance.
Definitely. I've often looked at the kettlebell as the apartment dweller solution. It's easy to keep a couple. The Russian concept was your courage corner. When they would go into different locations, military locations, you would identify where the courage corner was, and that's where you went to do your kettlebell training. And so setting up your own courage corner, whether it's in your house or your apartment or whatever, it's not that hard to do. It doesn't take that much space. It's really efficient. And yeah, you can check a lot of boxes, from metabolic conditioning to power to strength to a loaded kind of movement exploration like the get up. There's just a ton of things that can be accomplished there. I mean, I've spent some time with the barbell, done some powerlifting. I've been, I guess I would joke that I've been every kind of trainer, except the Olympic lifting trainer. I've been the body weight only guy, the functional training guy, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And, the kettlebell is a constant. The kettlebell, since I put hands on my first one in late 2001, there's never been a time where I didn't have one pretty close by.
Right, absolutely. We mentioned the get up several times throughout this, and that's another one of those very, like, I guess, well-known kettlebell exercises that continues to humble even the strongest individuals that way. And yet, there's people I see like Bobby Maximus, I think it is pushing the limits on it to the point where he's doing a barbell with like 135 pounds with a controlled like Turkish get up. Like, it's amazing to see what people are doing with that pattern. And it's something that I like, not just from a strength and total body, benefit standpoint, but also assessment standpoint as well. Is you can find a lot of information about that. And I forget if it was you or Pavel or who it was that wrote the article about using the get up with pauses, and you're doing like a minute per rep or something like that. I'd love to hear about your kind of breakdown within the Turkish get up, the applications you've seen of it, and also, from a load standpoint, how much do we look to load that versus like, hey, maybe we just slow the movement down and just embrace the time under tension suck that it can provide you with.
Yeah, I mean, I like to joke that the get up is one of those rare situations where the parts are greater than the whole. And people get lost in this idea that, well, I have to do this complete 7-step thing and do all I have to do all the things or none of the things. And the get up is one of those things where, if you can get to the elbow and to the hand, do what some people call about a half get up. There's a ton of benefit to be had there. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It is certainly useful and scalable to just a huge population. And ask not what the get up can do for you. Ask what you need from the get up. To paraphrase the famous political saying, and probably do it poorly. But anyway, so the get up for me is foundational. It is, if you work with an aging population, their number one fear is falling. Their number two fear is not being able to get back up. The get up is literally training for life, the ability to get from the ground to standing. And we start with body weight. There's no worry about the overhead arm, and we could dial in so many pieces of this. And this is where people come back to me and they're like, man, I was able to get down on the ground and play with the kids, my grandkids, and get back up, and it was great. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Now grab your kettlebell. We're doing some get-ups. And so initially, when you're learning to get up and you're doing it in a light fashion, because everybody should start with loads that are very manageable. Early in that process, I like to start the get up with presses. So we start pressing at all of the steps except for the window. So we do a floor press. We do a press when we get to the elbow. We do a press when we get to the hand, half kneeling, standing. And this is for two reasons. Number one, it builds a very resilient shoulder. We're pressing from different angles. We might discover something that we need to change or modify, or something that really challenges that person, builds strength in an area that they didn't realize they were lacking strength in. And now you know how to self-spot. So as you learn to get up with presses, If you'd make that transition from the elbow to the hand and you get unstable, you just pull the bell down to the rack position. So it enhances the shoulder strength and conditioning and resilience that we're building in the get up, but it also provides a really neat self-spotting technique within it. How far do we need to take the get up? It's an interesting question. I've certainly seen it is a very a good, well-performed get-up is going to take about sub 30 seconds. The get-up with pauses, and I think Dr. Mark Chang would be the author of the article that you were referring to, looking for those 1 minute get-ups. That's a long time under load. That offset center of mass, that is a benefit up to a certain point, guiding you into better overhead positions as you go through the get-up, becomes a significant challenge once the bell reaches a certain size. And that will vary on the individual a bit as to where that cut point is. Right between the 32 to 36 is kind of my cut point. 40 kilo get up feels different to me than a 36 kilo get up. Just the offset center of mass has changed just enough to where I'm like, oh, there's something a little different happening here. So for me, if you're going to press it, I want you to be able to do a get up with it. That just makes sense to me. And in my own training, the way I'll do it is whatever my day is going to be. The other day was a 36 kilo day. I will do a 24 kilo, 32 kilo, 36 kilo get up. And so I've done the get up with the heaviest weight that I'm going to be moving for that day. I do not think the get up is a good max effort exercise, both from a 1RM and an RM perspective. I do not think you need to set a maximum, a 1RM on this and keep progressing it. And I do not think you need to find out how many reps of a get up you can do within a certain period of time. I have, over the years, and I've done arguably, I've done a lot of get-ups. I'm not going to say I've done more than anybody else, because we have some people that have set world records and people that have maybe accumulated more reps than I have. But I've done a lot of get-ups. I have never really trained more than 5 to 10 each. 5 to 10 on each side within a session. Typically within that 5 or 6 each side range. Total of 10 get-ups. Total. 5 each arm. That's a good number. And I think because there is so much time under tension, you are performing all of these transitions under load. You do reach a point where the get-up will become something else. Some people will say circus trick sort of thing, but I think you got to get really freaking heavy before you reach that standpoint. I think for most people, ballpark, a half body weight get up to the 48 kilo is a good range of strength, but not something that needs to be pushed to higher and higher 1RMs. And
There's a point where the juice is no longer worth the squeeze at the end of the day.
100%.
And it sounds like that's very true with the get up. And I think ultimately, going back to what we talked about earlier, it's a tool. It comes back to how are you going to apply that within your work that way? Are you applying that as your warm up? Because you can do 3 get ups per side, and you've probably hit almost every joint in the body isometrically or mobility wise, to the point where you're probably feeling pretty good, ready to go. CNS is probably fired up. Like, there's a lot of benefit from that. Are you doing it as its standalone exercise, or are you doing it maybe as like a post-session kind of thing, where you just want to like get some movement before you walk out of the gym? Because I know the cool down is often forgotten about. I'm highly guilty of that myself, but something to, throttle down, for lack of a better way to put it, always beats going all the way up to throttle up as hard and fast as you can, and then nothing to come back down. I'll take something over nothing. And the other piece, you've brought up the breathing several times as we've been chatting, and that's been so interesting for me. if we were going to do the get up with holds, and it doesn't have to be the full 7 positions like you mentioned, but it's like, hey, we're going to walk through the first 3 on the floor. I just want you to hold it and breathe. And the amount of people, even high performing athletes at, D1 and higher levels, that struggle with breathing and struggle with literally their ability to just exchange gas is just mind blowing to me. It's like, they're highly gifted athletes, and, you look at their VO2 numbers, you look at all the things that they're doing, and it's like, man, you're world class. But then we have them breathe in unique positions, and it's like, it's just as much of a challenge for them to breathe as it is to move with load. It's just interesting to me, for lack of a better way to put it, how we miss some of these simple things, like literally just being able to breathe. And again, that's come up multiple times that way. People are always asking me, how do I breathe when I exercise? For you, when you're working with people with the kettlebell, regardless of, what exercise it is, maybe it's a squat, maybe it's the get up, whatever, how do you like to coach them on the breathing? Or is this something that it's like, hey, maybe we don't need to coach as much and just need to tell people, hey, don't forget to freaking breathe?
Um, it is so from a performance standpoint, and I'll go these are kind of I'll say these are like Pavel definitions because I've used these in other contexts and people are like, nobody else refers to it that way. Okay. I kind of don't care. This is how I refer to it. Essentially for performance purposes, there are two kind of breathing styles. One is anatomical style breathing, that as we're getting compressed, air gets forced out. As we're extending, air gets drawn in. We take advantage of that when we're stretching. That if I want to increase a hamstring stretch, I'm trying to, or go forward my toe touch, having an exhale when I'm getting compressed will enhance that stretch. For performance purposes, we switch into a biomechanical breathing match where now we're doing the opposite. When I'm getting compressed, I'm going to sniff in to that braced midsection and create that bubble of intra-abdominal pressure that's going to help. And not only does that help protect the spine, but it also hits off the baroreceptors that are in your abdominal cavity, and that's like plugging in the amplifier to your stereo system. Back when kids used to have stereos with amplifiers, you might have to look that one up, kids. But that will hit the juice on your power and let you hit those amplifiers, those baroreceptors in your abdomen, which will enhance your strength overall. And so from a performance standpoint, as I'm starting to move load, we use some high tension techniques, and we move through things like feed forward tension, setting that intra-abdominal pressure, getting tight for the load, using our irradiation. The more people cheering and helping the effort, the better the effort. And then we direct that with something called the dominanta, which is enough tension to enhance the lift. Tension is not the goal of the lift. Outside of something like a hard style plank where we are trying to squeeze as much tension into the system as possible for a 5 to 10 second effort. For most everything else, we need enough effort to enhance the press, for example. So something simple like the swing. When I'm hiking the bell, I'm sniffing into that braced midsection in the hike. As I finish the swing and I get trapped between my glutes and my abs, I have this hard exhale that happens because I've gotten trapped between my glutes and my abs. I'm actually getting some air knocked out, which sets me up for the next inhale on the next hike. Bunch of different breathing patterns, but in general, if we're going to follow a biomechanical breathing match and use that to enhance our strength, we're actually inhaling or even having short breath holds in the eccentric positions, and then we're having a hard exhale the last half to third of a particular movement, if we want to just put it into general categories. And then to your point of getting into positions that you can't breathe in, if you look at it from a threat standpoint to the brain, your brain is not really a fan of being in places where it can't breathe, because no breath, no life. So it's really fundamental, and it can answer a lot of questions sometimes when you find that position where somebody's like, But
Yeah.
I just lost my ability to breathe. Well, let's stay there. Hang on. Let's just take a breath and it'll reset. And then the body kind of figures out, oh, we're okay.
Right, right. And it's interesting because a lot of these podcast episodes we've been doing, this concept of athletes being overly specialized comes up a lot. And they're lacking various general qualities and general movement strategies that a lot of people feel they should have developed a little bit earlier. And they can't get into these weird, unique positions in a controlled training environment, but they end up there in sport, right? Look at how many weird, unique positions Patrick Mahomes, for example, ends up in when he's playing. Like he is one of those like master problem solvers. But from what I've been able to see, like his training has prepared him for that. I've never worked with him, but just from what I see, it's like, hey, they're doing something right here, in my opinion. If you get to that position and you have this neural panic of, oh, I can't breathe here, I am willing to bet, there's no studies on this that I know of, but I'm willing to bet that's one of the many factors that could play into this injury puzzle that everyone is trying to solve. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these things come back to your neural control. They come back to things that we can't necessarily just physically measure easily with a force plate. Yeah, I know there's different neural fatigue work and different things being done. That's great. But like a lot of these things trace back to, in my opinion, neural roots because of how quick that they happen. And it's like for some reason, an impulse was sent or it wasn't sent when it needed to be. And what comes back to that, I think everything traces back to the brain. And I think going back to Gray for a second, I'm pretty sure it was Gray that has the line of, hey, poor movement patterns can exist anywhere in the body, or poor movement exists anywhere in the body, but poor patterns only exist in the brain. Like it's a neural component that way. And I think a lot of these things we've discussed, like the kettlebell is incredible in every sense. Movement screens are incredible in every sense, but a lot of it comes back to more of the software than the hardware, in my opinion. That's not to say you can't build muscle and burn fat with them. You can. I mean, I think Tim Ferriss in his 4 Hour Body book talks the story about someone who lost like 100 pounds with nothing but a kettlebell for training. Like you can transform your body and your mind with this stuff. But I think a lot of the performance benefits that I see from it come to that neural side of things. And I think that's one of the things that I like about the kettlebell so much is because it's not implement, because it challenges you in other ways. Like your nervous system really has to listen and adapt on the fly instead of just being like, oh, this is the same load and same distribution that I've always had.
Well, and we just, pardon me, we just spent this, where I detailed kind of some of the high tension techniques and how we use breathing to feed forward tension, irradiation, things that are useful in a weight room. And they are, and that's how we build that foundational strength. And there's an application for that. Well, that's building strength. And this is going to sound really weird. That's not how you build stability. Stability and motor control are reactive and in the best situations anticipatory of the thing that's about to happen, the perturbation to the system, whether that's a change of direction or deceleration or acceleration, or whatever the case may be. That dichotomy is why you can see somebody that's really good in the weight room and they just don't seem to be able to bring it to the field, whatever field, court, position that they're in. And so when you look at, if you break it back down to something like core training and low back stuff, you'll see, the evidence-based people, point to this idea that, well, in the research, none of this, works. Well, then you go look at what they were doing, and what they were doing was planks and side planks and, abdominal exercises. Cool. Abdominal exercises are great. That's not core training. There's no reactive or anticipatory component to that. So now if we take you into a situation where we're applying a perturbation that has your body responding to that, and we actually start approaching training stability as the reactive and anticipatory component of the body, we get vastly different results. And so I'm not bothered by that dichotomy. Like I know that when I'm in the weight room or I'm at home getting ready to do my swings or my iron cardio work, I know I'm going to be feed forwarding my tension. I know I'm going to be using the techniques I know that make me strong with the implement and in the situation that I'm in. As I begin taking on things that have me moving more athletically, now I need to create the idea that I don't want to feed forward my tension. Nobody's walking around the field going, hang on, and trying to get braced before they do something. They're just moving. Actually, there's a great scene. It's an older movie. Who am I kidding? It's an old movie. It's the Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid movie, and with Robert Redford passing, it has been in my mind of late. And one of the characters, they're auditioning to protect this bank that they then plan to rob, but they're in they're seeing if they can be the guards. And one of the guys, Paul Newman, pulls his gun, and then the guy throws something on the ground and says, shoot it. And he misses like 3 or 4 times. And Paul Newman finally goes, can I move? And the guy's like, what do you mean? Can I draw? He's like, yeah, it's not going to help. Well, he hits it the next 3, 4 shots. Like his ability to move and be athletic and respond changed his performance entirely. I've always come back to that in my mind as an example with athletes and people that, yeah, if I put the guardrails on too tight, I can create a situation that doesn't come with you to the unpredictable and movement variability world. So I got to open up the guardrails just a little bit, let you learn, let you get these perturbations and respond appropriately with the safety guardrails up, just open a little bit more. And so, yeah, that neurological component, that's everything.
Right.
And the strength I build in the weight room using my high tension techniques and feed forward tension irradiation, like that's not the strategy that I'm using on the field, on the court. And so that bridge in between with knowing how to create stability via perturbations and situations that allow the athlete to really gain or regain that ability to anticipate and respond appropriately. Yeah, it's massive.
Yeah, I think about it in terms of attractor states, right? Like, hey, this certain movement pattern, how deep do we want that attractor state well to be? Do we want it to be an inch wide and a mile deep? Or do we want it to be a mile wide and an inch deep? Or do we want to have a combination of both where, hey, I have tight guardrails for one component of it, and they're going to move this way over and over and over and over again. But then another component, maybe then I widen it a little bit, because I think on one hand, there's value in having a super deep attractor well, but on the other hand, there's also value in being able to jump out of that and into the next one at a moment's notice. And as you mentioned, the anticipatory postural adjustment side of things, like to me, that's just such earth-shattering stuff, in my opinion. Like, it's like, wait a second, where's this been? Why haven't we been talking about this as much as we've talked about force development and producing more horsepower that way in athletes? Like, to me, that control piece is just as important, if not more important, right? Like, we always see these anomaly athletes that go out there and it's like, well, they're not the strongest in the weight room, or they're not the biggest, and yet they're hanging with others just fine. And I think a lot of it comes back to those components that maybe matter a little bit more to the athlete's success than how much weight is on a barbell.
100%. No, I think and Mahomes and Kelsey on the Chiefs are a good example. Like they're not the top of the list in the weight room, and they're not when you look at their performance in the tests that are used to see if somebody's going to be a good football player, they're all right. They're not at the top of the list. They're at the top of the list once you put them on that field. They're, and when you talk about quarterbacks and things like that, like the ability to see the field and and anticipate what's going to happen in the next half a second and where you need to put the ball. Like there's nothing in the weight room that does that. And I've had people that are like, well, I want to train like I want to look like a football player. And I'm like, have you ever been in a locker room? Have you ever seen the variety of bodies that are in an NFL locker room? It's not what you think it is. It's not a bodybuilding show, right? Certainly, there's some athletes walking around that they could step on stage, but That's just because their genetics and who they are. Um, yeah, I think something that hit me. I just finished watching Task, the limited series on HBO with Mark Ruffalo, and I'd pretty much watch anything Mark Ruffalo did. And I think he's a great actor. There's a line in there where he says, wisdom is knowing what to overlook. And I think that's been lost. It's hard to do in training because we think we need to do everything. But wisdom, as you get down the road a little bit, is like, that'll take care of itself. I just got to check this box over here, and that'll take care of itself. And so, understanding that there's that difference between what we're doing in the weight room, where we need to get that to transfer to the sport in the field, hitting those reactive components, and letting the athlete learn. I think one thing that I've been guilty of as a coach is trying to get something, perfect and get it there now. Get out of the way, let that athlete learn, keep them safe, open the guardrails enough to let those adjustments happen. A lot of good stuff in there.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more, Brett. And I mean, this has just been such an incredible conversation. I could continue this all day. This is amazing. I always love starting my day with stuff like this. Earlier, you mentioned that you're kind of taking on a new project that way outside of StrongFirst. What's kind of the latest work development for you on that front?
So I'm going to be a coach within the Kettlebell Transformation online training platform. So this is a training platform for men that are looking to transform typically weight loss sort of situations, and it's an online kettlebell focused online training platform. And I'm looking forward to getting in and starting work with the folks that are there and joining all the time, and kind of getting back to my coaching roots. I've been on the education end of things and pushing the rock uphill, as it were, on some of these projects. And I'm looking forward to being a coach and working, problem solving, motivating, teaching the thing that I love to teach, and being a part of that new team.
Absolutely. No, I can't wait to hear more about the work that you all do that way. I mean, from what I've heard so far, it's been incredible, right? Like there's so many individuals walking around saying like, look, I know I need to lose 20 to 30 pounds, but I've tried going to the gym. I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure why things aren't moving the way I want them to. And this solves that problem for them, right? It's now like, hey, you have a coach. You don't have to guess what to do anymore. And as we've discussed for the last hour, kettlebells work. They're great. You can do it anywhere. You can travel with it. Many years ago, this is, oh geez, probably at least 10 years ago, when I was back in high school, I subscribed to Men's Health magazine, like pretty much every young meathead does. And one of the write-ups they had in one of those articles many years ago was literally a truck driver who turned his life around because he traveled with a kettlebell. It's like, it's so simple.
Yep.
Again, anyone can do it. So I can't wait to hear more about what you and the team at Kettlebell Transformation do that way, Brett. For people who want to find out more about you and obviously keep up to date with all the amazing stuff you're doing in the space, where can they find you online?
So pretty much the only social media that I do or kind of pay attention to is Instagram, at Brett Jones SFG. And I do have a website, appliedstrength.com or theironcardio.com. They both go to the same place, whichever link you go to. And obviously I'll be on the Kettlebell Transformation team here coming up. And yeah, that's the best places.
That's awesome. I'll link to all of that in the description below. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there and keep up to date with everything Brett is doing, from Iron Cardio Volume 2 to Kettlebell Transformation and beyond. Brett, this was amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your time and your insights.
Thank you, Dan. Great to be on the podcast, and look forward to future conversations.